Hey everybody, OriginalRen here, and welcome back to the Fuwacast. It's been a long time since we have done a recording, but we are back, and we are now on episode 12, where we have 5 very special guests with us today. We don't want to really waste your time with all the details. I will post all the details in the thread, obviously, for any updates on the podcast that you need to figure out or what's going on so you can continue following it. But we're going to jump right in here because we have a really exciting podcast for you today. And our topic today will be introducing a genre, which is visual novels in this case, and how to attract newcomers to the VN world. Like I said, we have 5 very special guests with us today who will now introduce themselves. We have InvictusCobra, Ryechu, Sanahtlig. Can you pronounce your name for me? Sorry.
Sanahtlig.
Sanahtlig, Suikashoujo, and Traveler 101. All members of Fuwanovel who will be joining us today. So we'll just go in order here. If you guys can just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your VN history. Just a quick, I've played these games, or I've played a lot of VNs, or I'm really into this. And then we'll jump right into the cast. So, Invictus, if you would like to take the floor, it is now yours.
Thank you very much. I've been reading visual novels for about 2 years now, been a member of FUA for 3 weeks today, and the main visual novels I've read would have to be Fate Stay Night, Sayonauta, Rewrite, the BlazBlue franchise, and if you wish to consider it, Hoshizora no Memoria.
Very nice. All right, Ryechu.
I am Ryechu, and intentional misspelling of the Pokemon name.
Well, that's
I
just
have been on.
horrible.
I know. I've been on FUA for 2.5 years. I started almost very shortly after it opened, and I will play virtually anything. Yaoi, Yuri, Straight, Tentacles, Fuda, you name it, I will play it.
Nicely put. All right, very good. All right, Sana, floor's yours.
Yeah, so I'm Sanahtlig. I've been around Fuwanovel for about 2 years now. I post occasionally on Fuwazet as well as my personal blog, Sanahtlig's Corner. I've been following VNs for about 12 years now. I've been playing games in Japanese using translation tools for 8 years. Played around 150 visual novels, and my focus is visual novels with gameplay.
Very interesting. All right, Suika.
I'm Suikashoujo, and I've been playing VNs for probably about 5 years now, I think it was. And I joined FUA end of 2013, so I've been around for a little while. And since I started playing visual novels, I've probably played about, I think I checked my VNDB beforehand. I played about 64 or something. And I'll play pretty much anything, but I usually play stuff that's more like dramatic, I guess.
Robbing games. All right, fair enough. And Traveler 101.
Um, Traveler One, I've been playing VNs for about 3 months. I'll play almost anything, and I usually enjoy what I play. I started play around the VNs I liked more were Kajutsu, Little Busters, and Fate Stay Night.
All right, very nicely done. Well, first of all, I want to say welcome to all of you. It's glad to have you on the podcast today. We're going to jump right in here for everybody and get right into the discussion of newcomers and VNs. So, in order to start this topic out, one of the questions I do want to ask is tell me a little bit more about how you experienced visual novels when you first started out. Obviously, maybe if you remember what was your first visual novel that you played, and how did that equate to what you are now into today? I mean, what kind of inspired you about it? What are some qualities that stood out to you, or how did you get introduced to it, and what did you, as either a newcomer or a veteran, have coming into that? So I'll open this question up, and I guess we'll just start with. I'll start with Ryechu, I guess, here. Feel free to take the floor, and the floor is your guys, so enjoy.
So, my first visual novel I played back in 2010. It was Yume Mirukusuri, a drug that makes you dream. And the funny story behind it was that I found it at a used, like a thrift store. And I took it up to the counter. I had no idea what it was originally, and I thought, hey, look, a computer game that's 18 plus. Surely it's got to be good. And the guy said, "You know what you're buying, right?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And I bought it for $5. It was pretty awesome. Ended up playing that over 2 days, and that got me hooked on the series, just the storylines and everything like that. My first route ever was Katsida Nekoko, which I'm not sure if that's the best route to start with, but that's how it works. Um, After that, though, the second game that I ever played was Dual Face, which it was a by accident game. I had gone on the 4chan and they said, "Yeah, you should try Dual Phase," and I didn't realize, being the naive visual novel player that I was, that I was walking into a very, very, very terrible Nukage, and that's actually what got me hooked on Nukage, oddly enough. I started to realize that I wanted to see just how crazy the series could go. And since then, I've played virtually every genre of Nukia you can think of, but I've also played all the good major ones, Little Busters, Grisai no Kaijitsu, Fate Stay Night, you name it, I've played it, and I like the sex more than the story. I hate to admit that, but I do. And that's pretty much it for me.
Curiously enough, I want to ask you a question about that. So what you would probably say is that you kind of were exposed on your own accord and just kind of did the research yourself. Did you have any like word of mouth from anybody saying, "Oh man, visual novels are great"? I mean, you recommended that you said your friend or whatever told you some stuff, but like, was it mainly just kind of you discovering the genre, or did you have any other influence on that? Like when you first played that first game, were you like, "Oh, let's ask my friends about this," or did you kind of just do the research yourself?
I live in a little itty bitty town in Kansas, so I have no friends who are actually interested in this type of stuff. So, no, it turned out that I bought the game, I played it, and I'm like, oh, okay, I like this. And then I went to 4chan, which, as we all know, is the best place to get word of mouth.
Of course, fair enough, perfect. All right, anyone else on the story?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my first visual novel it was this like smaller game, True Remembrance. It was a kinetic novel from Insanity, I think it was. And I was like, oh, this is kind of nice, because I'd been into anime for a few years at that point, and I was really bored that summer, so I needed something that would take up a lot of time. So I started playing visual novels, and I pretty much got into it myself just because I had been watching anime. Like I think it was Higurashi and Shuffle at the time that were based off of visual novels, and I was like, I wonder what that's all about. So I looked into it. The stuff that I found was the first stuff that came up and the easiest to download and just play. And then I just never really got out of it.
Kept going. Yeah, makes sense. I guess so then, yeah, just like with the Raichu, kind of just did the research yourself. Wasn't really, no word of mouth or anything like that.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I didn't really have any friends that were like really into anime because like Raichu, I came from a pretty small town, so yeah, it was pretty much all by myself.
All right, fair enough. Sano or Traveler, anyone else?
So yeah, Sanahtlig speaking. So I got into VNs like this is like back in like 2001. So this was the internet, the visual novel community was a very different place back then. So I just got into VN because I saw them on a PDP client, and I just downloaded one of the first things I saw, a VN I'm sure no one's ever heard of called Love Potion. And I thought it was pretty bad, actually. It was just a Nukige. And then I played another Nukige. And then eventually I came across a few decent games. One of them was I think Crescendo and maybe Seasons of the Sakura. And like those non-Nukige games are kind of what impressed me. And then eventually I found the Jast forums and I became active there. And eventually, like I actually started buying their games because I realized, wow, this industry is so small, it needs support, or else, I mean, it's never going to go anywhere.
All right, so you are definitely our Vet2Go guy here. I've been on the scene for quite some time, according to that. Is there anything that you wish, this is kind of a different question from the other two, is there anything you wish that you would have done maybe differently getting into like, do you wish like, oh, I wish I was more exposed to this and I wish I found out about this sooner, or something that you realized over your VN career was kind of just developed as it went and you were pretty satisfied with it?
I mean, back when I was getting into this, the available choices were so much, smaller. There were only a few VNs available, so I just played what was available. And eventually I went through everything that was available, and I'm like, well, now I'm bored. So that's when I started getting into Japanese VNs and trying to, I guess learn Japanese is probably the wrong word. I'm just trying to play them in Japanese because there was nothing else to play. The situation nowadays is very different.
Completely true, which we'll get into a little bit later in the podcast. Traveler Invictus, do you have anything you'd like to share from your VN experience growing up?
Well, I've been being a VN fan has been very tied to the fact that I began watching anime. Like, I watched anime since I was a kid, Pokemon, Dragon Ball, all that, but I really got into anime in the summer of 2012 when I said what my friends now mocked me about. I said, anime? No, I don't like that. Why? Then it just said, oh, go watch this, and then they told me to go watch High School DxD, and I watched that, got hooked. Great show to get hooked on anime. Very good example of what it can offer. Then I started watching romances, which they said, oh, that's gay, that's for faggots and whatnot. Then I watched School Days as my first romance anime. Great recommendation, great guide to follow on. Then I went and did research that saw that it was based off a visual novel. Visual novel? What is this? So I searched around, and then I also watched Shuffle, and I thought it was also based on a visual novel, and I got curious and I decided to download Shuffle and School Days, and then I played around with School Days a bit, and basically that got me hooked on visual novels. So it was basically all my own initiative, and it's being a visual novel fan has been very tied to being an anime fan in general also.
Very interesting. We're 4 for 5 right now. I feel like me growing up, because I was actually exposed from a friend, and I feel everyone here has done their research themselves. So that's definitely interesting. Traveler, what is your experience? Were you exposed by a friend, or did you find it all yourself?
I was exposed. I was kind of exposed. I was beginning. A friend of mine got me hooked on animes. It was really close to when I started playing VNs. There was not a lot of time because I started watching animes in about the beginning of the year. Still know the name. I still know the number of the day that I actually got hooked on animes. And a few times after that, a few months, a friend was like, "Hey, look at this thing. There's actually games for this." And I was like, "Games? Wow." I mean, since I was, we were gamers. We liked the game, so like games plus anime. There's got to be something good out of here. So I actually went to the Fuwanovel and to know about the description of what a visual novel was, and I saw the little YouTube video over there, and I was like, oh wow, this actually looks interesting. But I put it off for a bit until I actually got VNs. My first VN was actually a fan made VN of Tlovru, which when I started playing it was Tlovru Trial Troubles, and I was like, oh, this is actually pretty interesting. So I started watching a bit more animes, and from time to time I picked up a VN, and I think I got more hooked on School Days actually as well, because it was actually one of my first VNs to play.
Okay,
and
so
I still enjoyed it.
Got the 2 on School Days today. All right, not bad. Okay, very interesting, guys. So we've kind of given a little backstory. Now we're going to kind of get into some of the questions as to, well, how can we exactly attract newcomers to the VN world? And I'm going to start this question by opening it up, where it's open discussion for everyone to give their opinion. And we'll start, I guess, with the basic questions of what games do you recommend as either vet or newcomer that everyone who is a newcomer to the VN world should check out, and which games do you think newcomers should possibly avoid? We obviously have our Nukige expert here, which is very interesting because it's going to be interesting to hear the opinions of what Nukige you might recommend, and say, oh, don't recommend Nukige, it'll turn them away from the genre. So the floor is yours, guys. Any one of you guys can start. The question is again, which visual novels would you recommend to newcomers, and which ones would you avoid? All yours.
So I can speak up first. This is Sanahtlig. So I think the key is really to match the right person with the right game. So I kind of have several games that I think kind of represent what I think are some of the best parts of the genre. So one game I recommend is School Days. And as we kind of saw from some of the responses so far, School Days is very popular. And at one point, Jazz said it was their best-selling visual novel. So it's very popular. It's highly interactive with many choices that matter, which I think is something that appeals to a Western audience. The animation makes it easy for anime fans to get into. And I think really it's the perfect game to ease players into the medium. People who are interested in anime, maybe even manga, or even just gamers. The second game that I recommend is Song of Sai. So this is probably for someone who's more interested in novels. So Song of Sai is short, tightly written, and moving. And it's basically a masterpiece that showcases the pinnacle of visual novel storytelling with mature and disturbing themes. Then you have the ever-popular Steins Gate, which has a highly popular anime tie-in, no sex for the people that sex is a turnoff. It has a gripping sci-fi setting and a time travel drama. And this is basically for your sci-fi nerd. Then you have, for people like the Steam crowd, I guess, you have games like Estelia the Eternal and Commodore Alchemy Meister. And these appeal to RPG players and general gamers, with Estelia being for more of a story focus and Commodore for more of a gameplay focus. And again, the key is to match the right person with the right game, I think.
For me,
go ahead. Yes, please.
For me, I think the two that I would really like. Again, it does depend on the person, but I think the two that I would most recommend, I guess, one would be Jisenju no Mao, because I feel like that one's kind of got a little bit of everything. I mean, it's got the romance, it's got a lot of mystery, it's got like the drama, and it's got like the choices. And I mean, it's a little bit unconventional in how it's set up, but it's a great story, and it's just really like I feel like the way it's paced is more like Western than some of the other VNs have played, because like just I don't know. I guess just the mystery of it all and all the suspense and the chapters and all that. And then the other one for people that don't really necessarily want to fully commit yet would be Planetarian, just because it's short. It's like a few hours long. It's really got that emotion because it's key, so of course it does. And it's got, and I don't know. I think those are probably the two that I would recommend the most.
Well, Invictus here, at least in my opinion, I think that it highly depends on, for example, if you're already a fan of anime or not. Because I remember that when I started watching anime, I started getting drawn to lollies, and that basically, I think that it helped me get into Sai no Uta. I am a pretty open person, but I think that if you were to show it like to just, let's say, a Western gamer who watches like just Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad or things like that, I'd say that for them to get into it, you'd have to find something that's closer. And if you're just getting into it, for example, you already know anime, you already know manga, all the Japanese mediums, I'd say that basically for a person to get in, if they don't want to put in much effort, they could read kinetic novels that they don't have decisions. You basically read it like a book with pictures and music, or you can give them a lighthearted visual novel that doesn't have almost no bad endings, because at least for me, bad endings can be a very big turnoff from a visual novel. And confession here, I never read a visual novel without a walkthrough, so that I know that I'm never walking into a dead end, which basically upsets me a lot. And as Sanahtlig said, with School Days, it is also a good beginner novel because it is fully animated, and there aren't much of those out there, especially translated, and they can be a very smooth transition in a way, and you can basically say, well, the anime ending was shit, let me try and change it.
I'm going to stop right there for a sec. I actually want to go back to one of Sana's points that he said, which was it's good because Western audiences like choices that matter. And Invictus, being our kind of newcomer here, being featured on the podcast, who hasn't played as many VMs as the rest of the guests on the podcast, how important do you think choices are when you were starting out with visual novels? Do you like reading more, or do you like choosing choices?
I think it depends. I've never been a book person, so reading visual novels, especially long ones, and being able to gobble them up with big interest is something that even for me it's a bit peculiar. Like, if I don't like books, why do I like what is basically a book with pictures? But in terms of decision making, I think that it can matter, and it also depends if it's, for example, like Blaze Blue, which is a visual novel, but it is also a fighting game, so it also has gameplay components that can influence how the story goes and the bad endings. But I think that in terms of decisions, I mean, I like decisions, but I like decisions in a way that it's not like, let's say, Fate Stay Night, which works on, at least not in the battles, it works on affection points, which most of the time can lead you to a bad end without you not knowing because you teased one of the heroines in terms of their lunch, and it got you in a bad ending near the end of the story, for example.
So if you were a newcomer introducing another one of your friends who would be a newcomer to the VN industry, would you recommend a game that has a lot of choices, or try to more? Let's say they didn't even give you a preference. They just said, just give me a random game. They didn't even give you preferences. They just said, just introduce me to the genre, and you had one choice to do it. And you've obviously said which games you think you should choose, but would you choose one that has a lot of decisions or no?
I think we would have to discuss whether the decisions were decisions that really mattered, or if they were meaningless ones. For example, saying, "Oh, where do you want to go after school? Want to go to the park or go to straight home?" If they have a lot of decisions, I'd have to ask him.
User left your channel.
Looks like we had a small disconnect, but that is okay. I actually will jump back in. That's all right. He'll be back pretty soon, hopefully. Okay, Sana, then I'll actually throw the question now to you, being more of our vet of the podcast. Invictus mentioned a lot of he doesn't like playing games, being a newcomer, with endings that are bad. He doesn't like going down those bad endings. I myself found it very difficult to play the rest of Fuwashoujo, getting the bad endings to get 100%, because I couldn't fathom myself to have all those feelings hurt me deep down. As a veteran, what do you think of bad ending choices? Are you a fan of them, or do you think they're kind of just like this is thrown in for just random enjoyment? What do you think?
At least of the VNs I've played, well, maybe it's just because I put a lot of effort and research into making sure that I kind of get the route I want. But I guess, yeah, for a newcomer who maybe is not going to put in that sort of effort, I sort of agree that sort of complex decision making that like you make a choice at the beginning that affects where you end up at the end of the game, that can be a turnoff. And when I talk about choices that matter, oftentimes I'm talking about choices where you have immediate feedback as to where it's pushing you. Like in school days, as you go along, you see the effect of your choices. It's not like you have some invisible affection meter that is pushing you towards one end or another, like without you even knowing it. And then there's a lot of VNs with these sort of bad ends, but they're not necessarily like bad ends at the end. It's like in Soul Link, which is a game by Naval. It's made by the same company that made Shuffle. It has lots and lots of bad ends, but they happen very quickly after the choice. So you go down that route, you get a bad end, you're like, whoops, I guess I made a mistake, back to the choice. And I don't think those are the sort will turn off newcomers. But I do agree that games, I guess like Snow Sakura and I know there's another game by Jazz that was very much like that that are sort of frustrating. I think those are kind of the end.
Snow Sakura was great. What are you talking about? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I think games like that frustrate players are probably not a good first game for a newcomer.
All right, fair enough. And Suiko, final point, I want to go back that you said. You talked about key and its emotion. Being a female VN player, how important, not even just like female either, but like how important do you think, like, if you were introducing someone to a VN, is that emotional aspect? Are you the person that is like, I'm going to make you cry to death, so you find these games absolutely amazing? Or are you kind of like, maybe we should do something that doesn't make you absolutely feel like your life has a different purpose? Because I know you've seen a lot of people like with Fuwashoujo, and those games are like, oh my gosh, this changed my life. So how important is emotion to you when introducing a VN? Because you mentioned that.
Well, I feel like it really depends on like who I'm talking to, because I mean I've had a few friends like ask me for recommendations before, And I usually do recommend, like, oh, you should play, like, Little Busters or something. Although I wouldn't really recommend Little Busters as a first looking back on it just because it's so long. But, yeah, I feel like for me personally, it's really important, so it tends to influence what I recommend for other people, just because I like really emotional VNs, so that's what I'm more likely to recommend is stuff I like. So I guess motion's important.
All right, fair enough. Ryechu and Traveler, any comments? You guys, as our Nuki Gay expert, and what would you like to please add to the discussion?
So, actually, I have two non-Nukage suggestions first, because these are the two that anyone who asks me what I recommend, these are the first things I will recommend to them no matter what. The first is Kira Kira. And then if they like Kira Kira, I'll also suggest them Deardrops. One is characters with music, one is music with characters. And Kira Kira is actually my favorite VN by a long shot, just because of the subject matter. I've played the piano for 20 years. The second one though, and it's a jazz title. It's Kana Imoto, which it's gonna be incest, but it may or may not be incest type of game. Where the protagonist's sister is in the hospital 24/7, and there's a romantic route that evolves from that, and it's a very, very good game. And Jast actually did just release a remake of it, and I've played it. It's actually very good. Now, from the Nukage standpoint, it again will depend on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to someone who likes yaoi, for instance, I'm instantly going to recommend them to play Zete Fukujumere, which I actually don't know the English title. I know it's not Enzai, but the other one that's been translated by Jast. I don't know the English title for it offhand.
Isn't it Absolute Obedience?
That's the one, yeah. And that one teeters on the edge of Nukage. What it is, it's 10 different scenarios. And if you play all of these scenarios 100% perfectly, you get the perfect end. And each one of them is, there's sex and all of them abound. If they're a Yuri fanatic, I instantly will go to Sonohana. Everyone seems to like the Sonohana games. Very, very light Yuri. And when I say light, I mean it's very, it's a Nukage. They're going at each other 24/7, but it's more cutesy than some of the hardcore Nukages that I've read before. If you're looking for a hardcore though, I actually suggest Kamon Bukake Ranch, which it's pseudo gameplay, pseudo I'm gonna screw everything that walks, and that one's actually very, very, very good. The original translation wasn't complete, and Manga Gamer had to release about, I think it was 3 different patches in order to get all the side routes that they had missed. But once you have the final patch and are able to see everything, there's a lot of cool stuff in there.
All right.
If I could interject, so this is Sanahtlig. So the comment on yaoi. So I'm not a yaoi gamer, so I'm not an authority on this. But from what I've heard, Absolute Obedience and Enzai were pretty badly received among the boys' love crowd. And recently, Manga Gamer has released a title, No Thank You, that seems to be, I guess, a lot better received. So I would point yaoi gamers to check that out.
Yeah, the difference there, though, No Thank You, the protagonist is actually bisexual, and he openly admits to that very early in the game. And my personal opinion, and again, this is an opinion, that the Enzai and Absolute Obedience off the bat, they were released in, towards the earlier side of VNs, and it wasn't well received because there was nothing. Well, A, there was nothing to compare it to, and B, people were like, "Well, wait, there's two guys having sex, and I'm used to this and this," and I think that's more of the reason why it wasn't well received. Granted, the editing job on it was garbage as well. But I think if it had been released later, or with some maybe not as good yaoi titles before it, it's better than a lot of other yaoi titles out there. Just for the sake of an example.
Yeah, I've just seen discussion on it, and there's yaoi gamers who play these games in Japanese, and they said they're a terrible choice of titles. Why did you bring these over?
And then if you really want to go that route, though, I would suggest Suikashoujo, but That's shameless advertising because I head up the team that translates that, but never mind.
Well, how much the anime for that?
Yeah, the anime is adorable, and that's why we're actually translating the games.
Yeah.
Traveler, your thoughts?
On the yaoi, I don't have a lot. I'm not a yaoi gamer, but yeah.
Oh, sorry, I meant more. Sorry, I'm confusion there. Not just the yaoi topic, but just any VNs you recommend to people. For newcomers. Sorry.
Oh, okay. If I was to recommend a new, if I was to recommend a VN to a newcomer, first I would make sure, because there's a problem with the Western audience, which is attention span, and there's a lot of people that don't actually like to sit 20 hours so they can act to the actual game. For example, I'm gonna give example. For example, Suikashoujo, it's a great anime, but I would not recommend it as a newcomer, for a newcomer, because it has a very long common route, and it's just something that turns some people off, and some people like to just have interactivity and like to just get to the story, just get to the point, because there's a lot of going around the same thing. I know common routes are actually necessary because it introduces the atmosphere and the ambience and what the people are leaving, but sometimes it's just it actually turns most people off because it's not something that most people like, because they just want to get to it. It's like, where's my H scenes? Where's my story? Where do I get the ending?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because this is a question I wanted to go back with that Ryechu mentioned, because he's, talks about Nuki recommendations. And this is a question for all of you. Kind of a more of a surprise question. What do you think, obviously, Ryechu, you have your opinion about this, you've kind of stated it, but what do you guys think of Nuki being in the genre as a newcomer? Do you think it's something that is turning people away from wanting to play VNs if they just see it from the outside before they make it, because obviously you judge things based on looks before you until you watch it, because like you see a movie trailer and you go, okay, that was a shitty movie trailer, I probably don't want to see this movie, but then you find out, oh, it's an amazing movie, whatever, or maybe the trailer's great but the movie sucked, So as a newcomer, let's say you don't know anything and you see these Nuki and you see stories and you're like, okay, visual novels. What do you guys think as a whole? Do you think they draw people away, or do you think it kind of just doesn't matter?
Well, I'm gonna have to go with the common answer again of it depends, because there was one friend, for example, that she asked me, she's like, oh yeah, you play those games, and I'm like, yeah, I do, and I'm gonna be honest, she likes that kind of like she watches hentai a lot, and we talk about that all the time. That's how we are. But she specifically wanted something with more like H scenes. So I was like, okay, well, there's good news. There's all these games out there that's pretty much just H scenes. And so that in that case it helped, but in other cases where I don't know the person as well and I don't know their stance on that stuff, it's kind of hard to recommend, like, even that they just go look it up on their own, because I don't know how they're going to react to it.
So you're kind of one of those people that would think, if you don't know their preferences, try to turn them away from, showing the H scene stuff and just explain more that the game is about a story? Is that what I'm kind of...
Yeah, pretty much, because, there was actually a guy a couple days ago, he asked me for recommendations, and, we've talked, we're friends, but I don't know, I still need to ask him this, I don't know how cool he is with that kind of stuff, so he's asking me for recommendations. I'm like, okay, do I give him the ones with H scenes, or do I just give him a list of all ages things? Because I'm not sure which way I should go on that. So I don't know.
Okay, very interesting. Any other thoughts?
I'd like to add a bit of a point. So the thing is, people don't seem to separate things. If the first thing they see is like a Nukigi, they think, oh my god, all these VNs are just games filled with porn on it. It's basically just pornos. If the first thing they see is it's for example a JRPG, is like, oh, this is just a Japanese RPG games. Sometimes people don't know is that there's variety. there's different games, and most people just don't know about that. And it seems that they don't, since they see, oh, okay, this is all just porn, so nope, turn off. And people don't tend to know that there's different games, and that's why sometimes people are kind of scared or shocked away. And it also depends on the themes, because since there's a culture shock. This is something I wanted to talk about. Since there's a culture shock between the West and the East, for example, there's this, for example, incest. For example, it's a very controversial topic, and it's not something that it's as well as accepted in the West as it is in the East, at least in my opinion, or what it seems like in the VN. So that's why some people are like, oh, what the fuck is this shit? Some brother and sister are fucking. This is weird. What? So there's a lot of people that don't know. Like, there's different things, and you should really try out a couple of variety. You should try out a couple of things differently to really figure out if you actually like or what you like. So, or just people are like, oh, okay, this is like, oh, there's a Moe VN, so all VNs must be like some cutesy tootsie shit. No, there's very different things for. It's like there's a lot of the different VNs for each taste.
Any other thoughts?
I want to hop in about the Steam games in general, because I've seen a lot of people lately that, you know, they have Steam and they see this game and it has cute characters and, oh, you know, I've never played these types of games before. You know, there's like the Nekopara, which is awful, or Sakura Spirit, which is going to have like 15,000 sequels and all of them are going to be garbage. And you know, and then you have like the decent OELVNs where like an Octave Higher, which is new. That one I'd recently played a couple games by Winterwolves. I did a Fuwa review, for instance, on Roommates, which cuts incredibly close to 18 plus material to the point where right before the clothing comes off, they do a 30 minutes later window, and magically it's the aftermath, and now the game can get a, you know, like a 16 rating and can go on Steam. And I think if they come in from that perspective first, and then they get into a more sexual game like any random game out there, and they realize that, you know, these games do have sex in them, I think that could potentially be a turnoff. If, you know, they're expecting this really good story and then magically all the sex appears in the next version. And a big example that I would provide is the Chodengeki Striker all ages version versus the 18 plus version, which literally all they did was pull out the 4 or 5 sex scenes and take out the little extra bonus scenes that you can get. And what was taken out of the game? Absolutely nothing. And that's a really interesting perspective.
Sean, any last thoughts?
Yeah, so I think, so this is Sanahtlig speaking. So, I mean, people, when they're looking at something new, they're just it's just people tend to do this where they just assume that the first thing they see is representative. I mean, that's just a basic bias, and you can't really do anything about that. All you can do is just kind of promote to people that, hey, there's a lot of diversity in this medium. It's like you don't sum up PC games as first-person shooters. I mean, that's just silly, and that's kind of the same thing applied to visual novels. There's a lot of variety, and you can't point at any single one and say, well, this is representative of the medium.
Interestingly enough, okay. Good points. I actually want to expand on a little different question now. Is that, you know, we talked about obviously like how to introduce with the H-scene content, and we talked a little bit about Steam. Another thing that I want to actually go back to that Traveler had mentioned was about how, you know, Grisai no Kajitsu, you talked about the long common route. And I thought about that for a second. I was thinking, okay, in that common route, there's a lot of comedy, which is the next question I kind of want to go into. We talked about emotion. We've talked about H-scene content. What do we think of comedy? There's a lot of different comedy styles, or how they represent comedy. You know, there's obviously comedy in most VNs you play unless it's like a very serious story in some way, shape, or form. And obviously, Japanese style comedy and its style of punchlines are very different than American Western style. Excuse me, American or Western style comedy. So I'm curious. I'll open this question to really anyone. What kind of comedy do you look for? Do you try to recommend VNs that'll make the person laugh as well? Or do you try to are you one of those people that try to find really a balance of everything? I mean, it's really hard to find a perfect balance unless it's like an amazing game. But how do you like style comedy? Because obviously some people may not find Japanese comedy funny.
From the translation perspective, I am currently I'm working on editing a Nukage called Lilium X Triangle, and Nosebleed is actually the person who translated that. And I'm also working on the Suikashoujo series, and I'm also working on a couple other smaller Nukage titles. And one of the things that we've noticed is how to standardize, Japanese jokes or Japanese puns that would make zero sense in English. And to answer the question in that aspect, it's will the joke make sense in English, or is it worth trying to rationalize the joke? Is it worth there's sometimes where we just end up making a translator's note saying, hey, this is why this is funny. If you get a giggle out of it, good for you. But it turns into this really weird scenario where I'm trying to make this really funny joke and no one's gonna understand it because, well, they don't get the culture. But to answer the second question, I do like comedy in visual novels. Nukage especially has a lot of comedy because there's a whole bunch of random scenes, and for a fact this is never going to happen, but you know what? It is hilarious anyway. Or then you get those really random comments. It's like the super serious scene, and the next thing this character's like, "Oh yeah, I went to this bar once, and this hooker hit on me, and it turned out the hooker had a penis." And just these random little giggle laughs in the middle of these super serious scenes. I look forward to those. I really, really, really do.
Interesting. Any other thoughts?
Sanahtlig speaking. So I'm not a big fan of comedy, especially the type find in MOA games. So that's just kind of my stance.
Can you give an example of something that you're just not really a fan of? Can you give an example of a game where you're just like, ugh, and just were completely turned off by it?
Yeah, Koehime Muso.
What was the scene? Hopefully it doesn't spoil the game. I don't think it would. Comedy scenes usually don't spoil.
Not any particular scene. It's just like the entire thing is like just a series of jokes. Just like, I guess what I call silly comedy.
Okay, so kind of like slapstick comedy?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Anyone else have a thought?
Traveler One speaking. I'd like to me, comedy is like it kind of fills a bit of the VN, kind of gives it a bit more interactions between the characters, and it's a funny thing to see if you like the comedy. I personally enjoy the comedy that appears in the visual novels. Some people it might not, but some people it might. I like because the amount of it's so ridiculous. Sometimes even the H scenes, how they throw that out, sometimes it's so ridiculous. It's hilarious. To me, it's one of the better things I look forward to, and most people probably would or would not enjoy. It depends on what they think about it.
Yeah, I think comedy in VNs is pretty good for the most part. I mean, like, there are a lot of games, like, I know this one's kind of divisive, but the Little Buster's Common Root is probably one of my favorite things. That and Grisaille are both really good for comedy, because just the way the characters interact is just so, like, weird and out there that it's hilarious. Like, I love that stuff. So I think I like it. And then there was another game. It was a darker game. I think it was Komu, but there were a lot of scenes in there where it's like it was supposed to be this dark, dramatic scene, and then they were out of nowhere there'd just be like this comedy scene, and I'm like, it doesn't really work. But it was still like the best part of the VN for me, I think. So, yeah, I like comedy.
All right, very nice. Just a quick interruption of the podcast here. It seems our member InvictusCobra has returned. I will be bringing him back into the podcast. He just had some small internet issues, so if we could all just welcome him back as I bring him into the channel here.
User was moved to your
Welcome
channel.
back, InvictusCobra. Yay,
Hi,
welcome back.
Hey. Welcome back.
Jesus Christ. Why did I have to have a blackout now?
Yeah, don't worry about it. So I'm
God damn it.
glad we got you back in. So we're actually just going to jump right back into the next question here. So our main discussion, we were kind of talking about comedy. We talked a little bit about, H scenes and introducing people with that, and that kind of like the issues surrounding that, if there is any issue with some people, and then obviously which VNs we kind of recommend to newcomers. So the next question I want to ask is one of the things that was brought up, and a little bit it was brought up by Traveler 101, was kind of ways to improve the newcomer scene. I'm curious to know what you guys think, because you've recommended some of your VNs, that you would recommend to people. In your own personal opinion, and I'll open this up to anyone that's curious to talk first, what do you think are ways that we can improve introducing people to VNs? Is there something that you wish was different now that you didn't have exposure to, or is there something maybe that you think that would be easier for people to understand? Are there recommendations, like just certain things, like what are some ways you can improve? Feel free to kind of cut into some of the companies that actually do translations for visual novels, which include Sekai Project, Manga Gamer, etc., and how they're introducing people to VNs, and maybe ways they can improve as well. So it's kind of just an open ways you think we can improve to attract more people to the VN world. And the floor is yours.
That's a tough one.
Okay,
Well,
let's try.
No,
Oh no, go
now
ahead.
that I'm back from the dead, I just like to say that, for example, regarding companies, and sorry to the person who makes money out of this, but I don't like Manga Gamer that much because, well, they just translate FAP material instead of translating good things like, for example, they translated F, and they also translated Shuffle, which was one of my first novels, so kudos to them. And, well, if porn is what gives the most profit, surely I understand. Well, no problem. But, for example, I think that translating Nukige's sure might bring in the most money, but sometimes to bring in more new people if they want to consider it just as something to watch like it was a hentai, I mean, no problem with that. But if people want, like, let's say something with a bit more meat in terms of story, translate something a bit more serious. I mean, it doesn't have to be always. It could be, for example, a side project of a 2 to 10 hour or a 10 to 30 hour visual novel going by VNDB statistics and criteria, but try to translate, for example, either things that they see that currently in the anime industry are paying off. For example, like Moe. Moe has been very big for the past years, and I'd say that bringing more of that into the West could be a good thing, and be it with H scenes or not. And if we were to bring in newcomers, if it was to bring real newcomers to Japanese media in general, I'd say try to avoid controversial things in the West, like, let's say, lollies, for example, which is most commonly associated with pedophilia, for example.
So I have a comment on that. So this is Sanahtlig speaking. So regarding the comments on Manga Gamer, so Manga Gamer also has the alias Nukige Gamer. And I think it's a misconception that all they release is Nukige. So what people go by when they say that is when they look at their list of releases and go like, well, this is 70% Nukige and only 30% other stuff, or whatever measure that they use. And what you have to realize is that they aim to basically localize a variety of different genres. And it just so happens that, let's say they have two teams, okay? So they have one team that works on Nukige and another team that works on non-Nukige, story-focused games. Now, your average Nukige is a lot shorter than your average story-focused game. So in the same amount of time, and you assign equal resources to both types, the Nukige team may crank out 4 titles, and the other team may only crank out 1 title, but they're actually the same amount of effort is getting put into both types. It's just that it takes a lot longer to work on a game like their most recently release of Princess Evangeline, which is actually it is that moe type of game that you're saying they should localize, but it takes a long time to release a game like that. Whereas the short Nukige, like the titles from Softhouse Seal, they can crank out 4 or 5 titles in the same amount of time. So that's my commentary on Manga Gamer. So I guess I can go through my whole spiel on this topic. So in general, regarding the companies and their styles of business. So in general, I just favor companies that license games I want to play, and other factors are secondary. So I like Jest, and the reason I like Jest is because they have what I think are some of the best licenses. And since about 2010, they focused on quality over quantity. And I'm just saying, like, the titles they choose to license. But like as far as other factors, like, for example, the new forms are pretty terrible. And I hope they get around to fixing those at some point. And they have like fairly decent marketing. As far as Manga Gamer, I've already touched on this a bit. One thing about Manga Gamer is they're very good at engaging their fans. They have people like Dodler on their PR team who I think are really great at reaching out to people. And Manga Gamer in general is well liked by the community and staff, at least people who follow them closely. They're very progressive with the content they're willing to work on. So they, like I said, they release a lot of different types of games. And they a lot of times they push the envelope with games like Emoto Paradise, which is it's basically kind of a game about incest and lollies, and they released it. That's the type of game that maybe Jest wouldn't have been willing to release. And also they're releasing games like Euphoria, which I think was very brave of them. And I encourage companies like Manga Gamer to really push that envelope and bring over different types of content that the market hasn't seen before. One thing about Manga Gamer, though, is their marketing needs a bit of improvement. You've probably never seen their ads like anywhere, and that's kind of a problem. One thing to mention, though, is since their licenses cover a broad variety of content, the quality of their license is very inconsistent. And because of that, you really need to have an idea of what you're looking for when you go to their site. You can't just pick a random title of theirs and expect to get what you want. You have to know what you're looking for. As far as Sekai Project goes, I don't think they've really released anything noteworthy as of yet. So I guess my opinion of them is still kind of up in the air. I'm not really interested in original English visual novels, and nor am I interested in all ages content. So their focus on that, is meh for me. That also notably, their founder Dovak is really quite good at putting his foot in his mouth, and I think that goes to their disadvantage sometimes. I think that covers my rant on this topic.
I have a question about that. So your statement on all ages games in general, I'm assuming you've played Clannad?
I have not.
Or have you? All right. So what's your thought? Like, because Sekai Project is relocalizing. I'm just going to use that term. Clannad, and it's an all ages game, and the hype behind it is real. I mean, as evidenced by the Kickstarter. But if they let's say they re-release it, would it be a game you'd consider playing?
Clannad? I mean, I've heard it's really good, but so like I said, I played around 150 visual novels, and you know how many of those are all ages? Probably under 5. So that's just not where my interest is.
Fair enough.
Yeah, for example, I haven't read Little Busters yet because I've been patiently waiting for the last 3 years for the H version to be translated, because I feel that reading the all ages version can be very good, and I don't deny it. But for me, at least, H scenes, while at least since it's key, they may be very badly written. They also add to the connection between the characters and how they develop their relationship throughout the story. In an example.
Interesting. Any other thoughts?
You're gonna be waiting a long time if you're waiting for Ecstasy.
We all.
Who's even working on that anymore?
I have no idea.
Is
It's
it Doki
probably just
Doki?
dead.
Doki fan subs for the
Oh my
Thanks, Doki.
god.
God damn it.
So maybe in 15 years,
Yeah,
Yay.
probably.
if you're lucky.
All right. Any other thoughts on ways to improve? Because I have another question here I can ask if that's a little difficult for you to come up with any responses. Okay, let's try like switching the question. So not just like the ways you can improve, but like let's give an example instead and go from there. So for you, Suika and Traveler, let's say, look at the Sakura games on Steam. Let's just think of those.
Oh god.
And
Oh god.
I
Wait,
want
let
you
me
to
actually take a look at them.
So no. So the Sakura series. Let's use as an example. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? And use this as the basis to feel how you think you can improve the market, especially even and what you think obviously of Steam as well, being an introductory for VNs, if you want to go into that as well. And what are your opinions on that?
I
So-
actually
Well,
have to look at the Sakura because
Okay.
I haven't actually saw that.
Well, for Steam, I don't know. I actually really like that more all ages stuff is coming out now because I mean, I'll be honest. When I got into visual novels, I was 12 years old, and there wasn't a huge pool of like non-porn stuff to get into, which is why I kind of had no choice and I just did it anyways. But and I mean that's great, that's fine. But if I want to actually buy stuff, I can't buy a lot of that stuff when I'm like 14 years old, you know. So I think it's great that now people who are like under 18 that people can actually get that stuff on Steam. I think that's great. But going into the Sakura series, I feel like those are kind of a double-edged sword because I mean, on the one hand, yeah, a lot of people are like, "Oh wow, look at this weird dumb game with all the like shiny boobs or whatever." But then and then it's telling more people that this genre exists, and I think that's a good thing. But yeah, I don't know if that's really the first impression we want to be giving off. I mean, there's more to it to most games than just weird shiny tits on Fox girls and stuff like. And I feel like people aren't going to look any further because like, oh, it's all just weird stuff like that. So I feel like it does go both ways.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, like at least from back of my head, I think that there's the Sakura series, there's Nekopara, which is another can of worms, and I think that Nameless is also on Steam, isn't it? Which I think is either I don't know if it's Korean or if it's a Japanese otome game, and basically it can give both ends of the spectrum. You can have like just pretty boys fawning over the protagonist, or you can have the contrary, some protagonist boy fawning over fox girls with boobs. So I think that at least I don't have much experience with Nukigays. I mean, I tried to read Emoto Paradise, but I dropped it because it had too much sex logic, right? I know. Then I think that Steam is also a very good introductory platform, and it already has the more sort of erotic part. It now would benefit from a balance of, let's say, more serious things in a way.
Okay. Traveler. Obviously, you don't know about the Sakura spirit, but maybe you've looked up some images as we've been discussing. Thoughts, impressions. Okay.
Actually,
Never played it, don't even know what it is. Looking at those images, what are your first impressions?
it looks like it looks like Kiki without H scenes. To be honest, it looks like just one of those things to please the ones who already are playing the VNs, who already are. It doesn't look like a newcomer friendly, but more like something you would give to a veteran or someone who's already enjoying the VNs. And it seems like that's what it's coming out to Steam. It's not coming out anything very friendly for newcomers. It's just more to give to tribute and to just veterans can start using Steam instead of non Steam, instead of nothing. Like you buy from here, it's easier. It's basically
See, it's interesting that you say that about like Sakura Spirit being more for veterans because most of the veterans that I've talked to are like, this is shit, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. So it's interesting that that's how you're looking at it.
Yeah, so I have a comment on that. This is Sanahtlig speaking. So yeah, I would also disagree that Sakura Spirit is the type of game that veterans play. That's like saying veterans who play lots of, very high-quality visual novels, like story-based ones, are going to go out and seek out doujin titles with subpar writing, average graphics, and the like. That's not how it works. I think definitely that Sacrosphere is something that has attracted attention from the mainstream crowd, I guess, for probably a lot of the wrong reasons. It's one of those types of viral types of content where it confirms a belief that people already have. And they can make fun of it and confirm to themselves that, yeah, visual novels are just these stupid fan service games.
Okay.
It honestly feels like Sekai Project just took a chance with it and said, how much fan service can we give these people without getting shot down by Steam? And that's all they really accomplished with that game.
But
It's garbage.
calm down, guys. If you want serious storytelling, you can always read Hatoful Boyfriend. There's
Hatoful
always
Boyfriend
that.
Of
actually
course.
did have a good story, okay? Like, it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be.
Hatoful is actually pretty good.
Yeah, I really didn't expect it, but it ended up being pretty decent. Like, it had a good story behind it, and I was shocked.
I think this is a good
I
transition.
don't know about it, but I wouldn't touch it for that. I'm sorry, I just want to say I don't know about it, but what I saw, and this is something because I saw it from like YouTubers, like mainstream YouTubers that would just never touch that or never even know what a VN is, and since titles like that came out, even the ones on Steam, they start poking it and start making fun of it, which also starts to confirm a stereotype about the VNs as well.
All right, I think this is a good transition actually to another question I wanted to ask. So let's ask this one because we're kind of running out of time here. We got about 15 minutes left. So one of the other questions I did want to ask was, would you, and this is open to anybody, recommend OEL VNs or Japanese translated VNs? Notice I said the word translated VNs for newcomers of the West to visual novels. For example, would you say, okay, you should try, we've recommended what VNs you should, these people should play, but would you recommend, now I'm saying a good OEVLN, so think of a good OEVLN that you may know of or have heard of, or if you don't like any, then think of one that you think might be decent, and then compare it to a Japanese translated novel that's good. Obviously, their styles are different. English writing style is very different than Japanese writing style. Which do you think is better to recommend first for a newcomer, and why? Floor is open.
So I have a comment on this. So I have personal biases at play here, but I regard original English language visual novels as kind of landmines because they're basically all doujin. They're all fan-made, and as such, the quality is going to vary all over the place. So you get people attracted to stuff like Sacrospirits, and they think, well, this is what visual novels are. So I think it's important kind of to emphasize that these are fan-made games, and that means you have a few good ones and a lot of not very good ones, and it's difficult to sort the two out. And then personally, I like the sexual content in eroge, and the original English visual novels, they either don't have that content or it's a Western take on sexual content, which honestly, like, I'll just say it straight out, I think it's inferior. I got into eroge because of the different, I guess, Japanese take on porn. The idea that it doesn't just have to be, a guy and a girl going at it for 5 or 10 minutes and, well, you're done. You have story, you have context, you have drama. And that's what I really like about eroge. And I think that sexual drama is something that's missing from Western games. And then in addition to that, I also like the Japanese cultural elements in Japanese visual novels, including things like the art style, the moe tropes, and the voice acting. And again, since original English language visual novels are especially missing voice acting, because they're fan projects, that you're missing a lot of the elements that are what I think make eroge good.
Any other thoughts?
And I also think that if OELVNs, if they were to have voice acting in English, it's like I've seen many people say on the ever popular sub versus dubs wars, that basically in English dubs or with English voice acting, it has a very different style than the Japanese voice acting. I noticed that in Blaze Blue, for example, it has subs and dubs, and there are characters, for example, my main favorite character, Hazama, he's basically batshit insane, and he's a real psychopath. And comparing the Japanese voice actor Nakamura Yuichi with the um, English voice actor, I can't remember his name right now. I mean, they both do good jobs, but with the Japanese voice acting, you just get a whole other feel of how crazy the guy is, and it's really a difference in terms of styles and in how they want to make their characters look, give a certain perspective on the story. If OELVNs are just trying to emulate it, most of the times they might achieve it on certain points, but be lacking in others.
Any other thoughts?
I think the problem with OELVNs is that the only one that people are really super familiar with and compare it to is Katawa Shoujo. And granted, I like Katawa Shoujo. You know, I played it I played it a while back. You know, I liked it. I enjoyed it, and you know, that's pretty much all I'm gonna say about it. But I've had friends who have played that, and that was their first VN ever, and now they won't even give a Japanese translated game a try because, oh, the art style is so different, and I can't connect to these characters, and you know, if if they use that as their gateway drug, it's the gateway drug's just not going to work because it's a gate to nowhere. It's a gate to a dead end.
It's interesting you mention this because I will comment on one thing. When my friend introduced me, I don't know, I said I wouldn't really participate in this podcast, but this is something that I do want to participate on. When my friend introduced me to Katawa Shoujo, he refused to touch any Japanese visual novels because he wasn't a fan of just the cultural aspect and the kind of anime-ish style to it, where it was like, oh, there's girls' panty shots, and we're talking like Moege, obviously, because we didn't really know the full Grisayas and those kind of full story games at the time. And I, on the other hand, as a newcomer, transitioned into that and then got into those types of games. So that's just something it's interesting that you mentioned, you know, like them being that gateway drug. Because I think I can fairly say that probably about 95% of Western audiences began with Katawa Shoujo. Could be wrong about the statistic, but I'm pretty sure that's pretty damn close, seeing how many people say I started with Katawa Shoujo. Any other thoughts on just OEVLNs or...
Well, I think with art style it depends because even in the Japanese studios you can see that they have very distinct art styles. For example, if you were to compare something from Key to something from Favorite, like take Clannad or Little Busters and compare it to Hoshizora no Memoria, I think you can find very highly contrast differences, it was also one of the things that I enjoyed from Hoshizora no Memoria is that Favorite has a very distinct art style, and I think that, for example, in terms of art styles, you can find highly conflicting ones in solely translated Japanese visual novels as well, for example.
All right. Any last thoughts on that question?
And just to add to that, so if you look at the typical visual novel and then you look at something like Starless, well, there's a very big contrast in art style there.
All right. All right, so the last question, because we got to go 5 minutes left here before we wrap up our podcast, that I want to quick ask for all of you is the one question that wasn't answered. We talked about which visual novels you know, that we recommend to attract people. But I'm just going to ask this question kind of as a fun question. We'll go in order here based on the team speak. So Invictus, you can answer first, and then we'll go down. What is one VN that you absolutely say never play this game ever to a newcomer, and why?
I don't have any examples because most of the visual novels that I've played, I've liked. But if I had to give just one example, it was, I don't remember the full name, but if you just search one on visual novel database, you'll get it. It's basically that supposed first visual novel that Key made before they were Key. I read it, and I only read one route because the supposed plot twist that happens in the end of all, it happens in the end of all routes, and it's basically one of those plot twists that the person reads and it's like, what the hell? This didn't conclude anything at all, and I'm just sitting here with an inconclusive story and basically people in misery. And it's basically all the routes like that.
Alright. Ryechu, 1VN. Never play it. Why?
I'm actually gonna name two. One's a Nukage and one's an actual game.
Alright.
So the one game that this is the only VN I'm ever dropped, and that is Yoju Senki 80 2048, which was it was a G Collections release. I think it's Pretty Soldier Wars was the translation. It was a RPG with tentacle monsters, and beside the fact that the game was miserably hard. If you made one mistake, you were pretty much dead. The sex scenes were awful. The story was awful. No one cared. I dropped the game about 4 missions in, so I gave it a good try. The Nukage I would suggest no one ever play ever is Dual Face. Do not play Dual Face. It's 2 little lolly girls who put almost their entire bodies inside of each other, and I'll let you picture that. And I will be putting a review up on Fuwa Reviews on my Nukage Corner sometime the next month or so, just to prove just how bad this game is.
Interesting. Very interesting on that one. Alright, Sana, one game, absolutely avoid, and why?
That's me. I would say if my heart had wings, and I actually wrote an article about the censorship in that, and I'm highly proposed that, a big proponent of people basically boycotting that, because they basically stripped not only the sexual content out of it, but they basically sterilized it for Western release. And not only did they do that, but apparently the translation was terrible. So I would suggest that people stay away from that at all costs, and let it kind of serve as a lesson to Japanese companies that if you want to bring your games over in the West, you can't do that.
Fair enough. Suika, one game, and why?
Sorry, I only have a second, but Hardcore Otome, that was the worst game I've ever played in my life. It was just boring, it was long, and there was nothing. There was nothing there. There's nothing worth playing in Hardcore Otome.
Okay, fair enough. And Traveler, 101.
I haven't played a lot of games, and I have a bit of a fanboyish attitude, so I liked most games I played, but to say one that it depends. For example, it's one of the only Nukages I've played, which I don't know the name in Japanese, but it's Slave Witch April. It's just, unless you're really into that kind of play, which is stagnation and bestiality, it's some of the Nukigi types. I wouldn't recommend much watching that, especially for a newcomer. Someone who's a bit more into can give it a try, but unless you started watching VNs for Nukiges, I wouldn't recommend you watching something like that.
Fair enough. All right, guys, and with that, we will wrap up the podcast. We got about 2 minutes left here. Are there any final thoughts that anyone wants to say within a minute that was not addressed?
Yeah, so this is Sanahtlig speaking. So one very important message I want to promote to everyone listening is that if you like visual novels, if you enjoy visual novels, that you should support the official companies licensing and bringing these over. Not only are you supporting basically the translation of more visual novels, but you're also supporting the developers who put them out, and you're encouraging them to reach out to the Western audience. I think this is really important. This is a very small market. Every sale counts, as JAS, Manga or Sekai Project will tell you. So find the games you like, find the companies you like, and support them.
Very well said. Anyone else?
Keep an open mind, because you'll probably find, even in story-driven visual novels, you might find some very, very weird things, but some of the times they're going to be worth it. For example, like in Sai no Uta, it might be hard to swallow at first, but in the end you'll see that the story really pays off.
All right. All right, guys, and with that...
Sorry.
Oh, yes, go ahead. No, please.
Before
Sorry.
that, I would also like to say that if you just because you didn't like one VN or you didn't like the second VN you played, I think you should at least try a bit more and try different ones. You shouldn't give up like at the first time. It's like, oh my god, this was the worst, so all VNs are the worst. You should keep a bit of a diversification, and you should try to reach out as many genres different as you can.
All right, well said, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining me for the podcast. You can all say goodbye to your fellow listeners today as we wrap up here. Thanks for all your opinions. Thanks for joining me on the podcast. And as I said to everybody else, we'll upload this. Our fantastic Mr. Major will make a YouTube video of it, and we will get it on the YouTube channel as soon as we can. All right, feel free to say goodbye, guys. We'll sign off.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye,
Fuck
everybody.
blackouts.